looking at something slightly different. This is still a quadratic, but it's a quadratic with only 2 terms as opposed to 3 terms. So I know it's a quadratic because it has the highest degree of 2. So I know that this makes it a quadratic. So I can do quadratic things with quadratics. So in the previous video I talked about standard form. So standard form would be ax squared plus bx plus c. So when I'm looking here, my y squared goes in my x squared column. But where does my negative 9 go? Does it go in the c or does it go in the bx? There is no x, so that means it goes here. So that means I'm missing something in the center. What am I missing? I am missing a y term. So if I have no y term, 0 means none. Okay? So this means none or no. Okay? So I have no y, so I'm going to put 0y. So now that means I can rewrite this to be 4y squared plus 0y minus 9. So I'm going to look for my greatest common factor between 4, 0, and negative 9. Excuse me, let's just make that positive. So I know there is none because this is 1 times 4. This is 2 times 2. Anything times 0 gives me 0. 1 times 0, 2 times 0, and then so on. And then this here is going to be 1 times 9, 3 times 3. So the only thing that they have in common is 1. So on step 1, when my greatest common factor is 1, that means I have none. So I'm not going to divide anything out. That means I can go straight to step 2. So step 2 is I'm going to multiply my first term and my last term, which gives me negative 36y squared. But I want my center term right here, 0y. So I'm looking for my factors of 36y squared that will add up to 0y. So I know this is going to be 1y times 36y, 2y times 18y, 3y times 12y, 4y times 9y, 6y times 6y. Okay, so those are all my factors, but they're multiplying up to positive. I want negative, so I'm simply going to make this column negative. So when I'm looking through, I want to know which factors are going to add up to give me 0. And the ones that add up to give me 0 is 6y minus 6y. That gives me 0y. So that is what I'm going to be replacing this by. So that means I have, I'm going to write this down, 4y squared plus 6y, and then I have minus 6y, that's what the 0y equals, and then I'm going to bring down my negative 9. Okay, so 6y minus 6y is what's replacing 0y. Now I'm going to group it. So I have 4y squared plus 6y is my first group, and negative 6y minus 9 is my second group. so I want to know, I'm going to look in my first group, what is my greatest common factors between 4y squared and 6y? Well, the easy one to see is they both have a y term, so I know I can factor out a y. And then my greatest common factor between 4 and 6 is going to be 2. So that means I factor out a 2y. Now I divide. 4y squared divided by 2y gives me 2y. And 6y divided by 2y gives me 3. Okay. In the previous video I brought down the plus. I don't have to in this case, but I'm going to just for continuity. I have a negative first term, which means I know I'm going to divide by a negative. So a common factor between 6 and 9 is 3. There is no y in the second term, so I can't factor that out. So I have to bring that negative 3 out front. Then I divide. Negative 6y divided by negative 3 gives me 2y, and negative 9 divided by negative 3 gives me a positive 3. So one thing that I do want to point out is notice how these binomials are exactly the same. If these binomials are not exactly the same, it means you've made a mistake and you need to go back to what you've done over here or see if you copied this correctly. There will be some mistake that you did above if you don't get this. So our common factors here are the 2y plus 3. So I can divide out 2y plus 3. So remember, just as we've been doing all along, we've got to bring that out front. I'm going to keep it as a parentheses because it's one number. So remember that 2y plus 3 divided by 2y plus 3 is 1. So then that leaves me with my other binomial, which is 2y, that's this one right here, and minus 3. So I've just factored 4y squared minus 9. Okay, so I know that this video is getting a little long, but this is how we've been factoring all along. But I want to show you a shortcut. And this shortcut only works with difference of squares. So it only works with something that's like x squared minus y squared. Something that has this sort of pattern in it where we are missing our middle term. So what did I have? I had 4y squared minus 9. So this is the shortcut. I can take the square root of the first, square root of the last. The square root of 4y squared is 2y. So that gets written in the front. And the square root of 9 is 3. That gets written in the back. And then all I have to do is a plus minus. So notice that my answer becomes exactly the same. I caution you about the shortcut because sure enough, if you use this for anything else, it won't work. It only works for the difference of squares. And what does that mean? Well, 4y squared, this is a perfect square, and 9, that is a perfect square. And then the difference is when I have a minus. It will not work if this is a plus. It only works if it's a minus.